Okay, good morning, ladies and gents. This week's Parsha is Behar. We interrupt this program for a class. Meira, we interrupt this program for a class. You're welcome, take it. This week's Parsha is Behar. It's in the book of Chumash Vayikra, book of Leviticus, chapter 25, verse 1. Thank you very much. Through chapter 26, verse 2. There are only 57 verses in the Parsha, but it has a total of 24 commandments, 7 positive, 17 negative. Now, Parsha's Behar, as we've discussed in the past, many times is connected and read together with next week's portion, Parsha's B'chul Kaisai. However, this year it is not. Why not?
Leap year.
Because when we have a leap year, we spread out the portions because, again, we have to go through the entirety of the Torah in a one-year cycle. And when we have an extra leap year, then we have an extra month. When Jews give big portions. So in the secular world, the leap year is one day. Jews give that's one day. Did a whole portion, give a whole month. So because there's an extra, because we have an extra month, so we break up some of the portions that are split, that are many times read together. Okay. So I just wanted to, there's a lot more to talk about from last week about Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name. But I do, I just wanted to mention some very not so simple, but simple ideas that are practical. How do you sanctify God's name? So the obvious answer is keeping Torah mitzvahs. 2 is having faith, and 3, making decisions based upon that, and just thinking things through. What would God want me to do in this situation? So again, there's much that more needs to be discussed about it, but I did want to sort of give some little food for thought ideas about how to sanctify God's name. And especially when we talked about living a Kiddush Hashem, living a sanctification of God's name. I'll tell you, it popped into my head now. So I always take when I'm giving a class and a story pops into my head, I look at it as a divine sign that I should share it with you. There's a fellow named Mr. Werdiger. He lives in New York. He's a very he's a religious Jew who's a very has a very successful sports clothing company, and he gets a call one day from the ambassador of South Korea, the ambassador to the United Nations of South Korea. Okay, it says, what can I do for you? So he said, I want to go out to lunch with you. He says, well, I don't know if I should, a kosher restaurant. He finds a fine, very expensive kosher restaurant. And he says, I'm going to meet you there whenever it is, at this and this time. And he comes there and he says, Mr. Werdiger says, I'm very honored that you take me out to lunch, but what's this all about? It says, let me tell you something. A year ago, a representative of my government that was in the United Nations contacted you about could a woman go work for you in your company. Just she wants to learn the ropes. She's new to America, whatever. And you graciously connected to your HR people, and they took her. And I want to thank you. Says, what are you thanking me for? Thank you for sending us your daughter. I said, no, you don't understand. As the Koreans, we are like the Jews, we're very family orientated, and we were concerned. A daughter is going to New York. and it's a big city and a lot going on in it, and she's working for a big company there. What's it going to be like for her? And all my daughter can tell us about is how special the Jews are. She works for this company. There's no cursing going on here. The people treat each other nicely. They even have people come in daily. Different rabbis come in to visit to collect money for their worthy organizations to meet. And they even have services there in the afternoon services. And it just was a very wholesome environment for her. And I want to thank you. He says, wow, I'm very honored, And he made sure to find out who the girl was. He didn't even know who she was. And this ambassador said there were a lot of resolutions against Israel, and my country was always voting against Israel. And I called the upper ups in South Korea, and I says, why are we voting against Israel? So I don't know, that's what we always did. He says, well, they're very nice people. And he changed, and he stopped voting against Israel. And he changed the vote of the South Korean government in Israel. And all because nothing special was done, but it was running your business the way you're supposed to be running it. Just a very sweet, sweet story. So now the Parsha begins with an interesting line. So that's a little bit of a sample of Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name. So the Parsha begins with the following line, and I'll read it in English on page 697. Hashem spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come to the land that I give you, the land shall observe a Sabbath rest for Hashem. For 6 years you may sow your field, and for 6 years you may prune your vineyard, and you may gather in its crops. But the 7th year you shall be a complete rest for the land, a Sabbath for Hashem. Your field shall not sow, and your vineyard shall not prune. So this is where the word, some of you may know it, called sabbatical comes from the Torah, of having a year sabbatical. So we're going to get into the laws of Shemitah, of the sabbatical year, in a few minutes. But there's a very interesting thing that the commentaries teach us. Why does it say, and Hashem spoke to Moshe at Mount Sinai? All the commandments were given at Mount Sinai. And in fact, that's the answer. Just like the laws here are given, all of the laws for all of the commandments were given at Mount Sinai. Now, this is what's an important point to be aware of. You have the sheet here that has a lot of information about the Parsha. For those of you not here, you can always get it. Call the office or email. We'll send you Parsha facts. You'll know a lot about the Parsha, but you're not going to know the whole class. Why not? Because it's just an outline. So when it comes to the Torah, the written Torah, the 5 books of Moses, known as the Chumash is Chamesh, 5. The 5 books of Moses are the written Torah. But there's an accompanying aspect that came along with it, and that's called the oral Torah. That was given out orally. And there are many, 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 many examples of that we can see that that's the way it is. But what's important to know about it is that there is a oral Torah that was given at Mount Sinai as well. Later on, the oral Torah was given to Moshe, learned it from God. He passed it on to Joshua, Yeshua. Joshua gave it to the elders taught it, etc., etc., etc. Eventually, it was written down partially as the Mishnah, and then later on as the Gemara, which makes up the Talmud, and then later on in the as well as the Medrash, and as well as the Kabbalistic works, the Zohar, and it spread out. It's written out more and more because people were forgetting because of persecution. So the rabbis decided it's time to write it down. But it's very important to know that there is a oral Torah that was given at Mount Sinai at the same time. Without it, you don't know how you build a sukkah, which shofar can you use, which shofar can't use, how to do a marriage ceremony. The list goes on that there's a lot of information missing from the text. It could be alluded to in the text. We derive it from the text, but it's not going to be black and white in the text because the oral Torah was a companion that came along with the written. Yes.
So the Gemara is the commentary on the Mishnah.
The Gemara expands the Mishnah, correct. Medrash is a side book that has to do with usually a lot of lessons and also related to the Torah portions, written in the Torah portion. A lot of this Bible has been translated already, by the way. So some of it's available in English. All right, so this is very important to know about the oral Torah, and that all of that was given at Mount Sinai as well. And by the way, there's many examples. I'll give you an example that there's so many things that if you take the Torah literally, you're going to be totally misguided and get the wrong impression. What I mean by that is, let's say the most famous mistake is an eye for an eye. What does that sound like? When you knock out somebody else's eye, you knock out his eye. But that's not what the Torah teaches us. The Torah says an eye for an eye means that if you damage somebody else's eye, that you have to owe him monetary compensation. You have to pay him back. So that's a very big difference from the literal meaning of the words to the oral Torah telling us what God meant by that. Everyone with me? Another example is on Sukkot we wave a citron. It looks like a lemon. It looks like a lemon, but it's not a lemon. And if you bought one that says sun-kissed on it, don't use it. It's the wrong one. Okay. But it doesn't say that in the Torah. It says pre-eitz hadar, a fruit of a good tree. But around the globe, what Jews use is a citron. That's what it is, because that's the oral tradition. It teaches us that. So again, this is one of many examples of the importance of having the oral Torah, to help us understand what the written Torah is about. So what do they have to do? The Torah commands us that every 7 years we leave the field in Israel fallow, and you can't. The crops are free. People can come into somebody else's field and take it. Now they can't sell it, but they can pick it for themselves. They can sow and plant. Cannot sow a plant; those are prohibited. And you can just do the things in the field to help the plant survive. That's it. And believe it or not, this is relevant today. Now, this is a fascinating thing. This is a very challenging test of faith. Very challenging test of faith. Because clearly, a farmer in Israel wants to sell his produce. And here, it's not so simple. And it's complicated how it's done. But there are many even secular farmers that are keeping Shemitah today, keeping the sabbatical year. And again, the laws are very complex. And what they do is they offer them some sort of compensation, and they take the fruit and they make a co-op out of it, and they sell it at cost price. But this is a tremendous, what it's a reminder of it, whose land is it? And it's God's. So it's God's land, and God is the commander. And what's fascinating, by the way, is the Torah, and there are many books. There's a book called the Sefer HaChinuch, the Book of Mitzvos. The library has copies of it. We have it downstairs in the shul, where it explains about each mitzvah. And we know a lot of reasons about each commandment. But the bottom line is, the reason why we should do the mitzvah is not because we understand, it's because God commanded us. And even a non-Jew who keeps the 7 Noachite laws, the minimal laws for non-Jews to keep, if the non-Jew is doing it because God commanded it, not because he understands it or she understands it, but because this is what God said, he gets tremendous reward for that. Not Jewish, but he gets rewarded because he's following God's commandments. So this is a very important idea. So why 7 years? Well, the number 7 is a very, very important number in Judaism because 7 represents completion. We have Shabbos, the 7th day of the week. We have the 7th month of the year is Tishrei. We have all the major holidays in there. We have 7 days of the holiday of Passover in Israel. We have 7 days of blessing for bride and groom. The 7 days of the Sukkot holiday. Actually, music has 7 notes. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, mi, do. Same one as the 8th one is the same one as the first one. It's just that it's an octave higher. 7 weeks from Passover to Shavuos. That's what we're in it now. 7 days of mourning. 7 blessings we say for the bride and groom. You have 7 in the dreams of Pharaoh. 7 times Joshua circled Jericho. You wrap it on your hand 7 times, correct? 7 times sprinkling of the blood for sacrifices. A lot of 7s. So 7 is completion on this world. And what it does is it's Shabbos magnified. And those who keep the Shemitah are looked upon as tremendous heroes, power of faith, because they're willing to not to work in the field. And there's some fascinating stories. Here's a story about in 2007, 2008. There are miracles that happened. So I'm going to read you a little bit of an article about this one. A completely secular farmer whose produce is bananas decided that he would undertake to keep Shemitah this time around. He approached the Keren HaShriyas, that's an organization that supports people who want to keep the sabbatical year, for assistance. They stipulated he would be registered in their program if he would also undertake to be personally Shabbos observant. He agreed, and they covered his farming expenses. In return, all the produce became the property of the court in Bnei Brak and distributed according to full accordance with Jewish law. Israel suffered a cold spell over 2-3 weeks. Bananas don't like cold, nor does cold like bananas. So they don't get along. And a lot of the bananas that were still growing got hit with frost. They turned brown and became rock solid hard. The hero of our story, the banana farmer, knew that he was in deep trouble when the relentless cold hadn't let up for over a week. He lived a distance from his orchard and hadn't seen the damage with his own eyes. He began to receive calls from his neighbors, farmers who had orchards bordering his, complaining bitterly that the entire banana crop had been destroyed by the frost. He decided it was time to inspect the damage up close, no matter how painful it was. He drove there and he passed one orchard after another and overwhelmed by the damage. Not a single fruit had survived, no tree was spared. His neighbors took a beating. When he finally got to his orchard, he was awestruck. All of his bananas were yellow and green, as if the orchard was not part of this lot of land. He boarded his neighbors, but not one of his trees were damaged. It just was amazing. He rushed from one, and he called the Keren HaShriyas, and he said, "It's a nace, it's a nace." It's a little hot. Let me show it to you. And you can see the pictures of the neighboring plots of land didn't do well, but his did very, very well. And then there's another story about a guy who kept it, and he couldn't even rent out. He wasn't allowed to rent out his tractor and other farming equipment for the neighbors. The year was over, and he went to the grain center, and he told that the distribution had ended a long time ago to the farmers who didn't observe Shemitah, and the only thing that was left was inferior quality celery seeds that were about to be discarded, but he could take those. And he did this, and he took a bunch of celery seeds and he planted them in the fields that he owned. The celery crop began to grow. He couldn't believe what he saw. The celery grew 3 times its normal crop and a record height. And everyone was making fun of him. Effie, what are you going to do with all those celery? He said, I did my share, now Hashem will do the rest. And even the rabbis wanted to go, oh, he has so much celery, what's he going to do with it? One day he got a call from the regional director, what did you do with the celery seeds I gave you? Ask me what I did with them. I eat and breathe celery. Even my neighbors call me Mr. Celery. Tell me I need an enormous amount of celery. Are you able to supply? No problem. Listen, the market price of celery is 50% per head. However, you can charge whatever price you want, even $5 a head. What happened? Because during the recent frost in Europe, the entire celery crop was ruined in Europe. So they're desperate for celery, for this vegetable to add to their hot soups. And I've been inundated with requests. I'll arrange for air freight to England, Holland, Belgium, France, and the rest of Europe. And they work 24/6 to load the hundreds of delivery trucks which deliver the entire produce to the airport. And he bought himself a luxurious automobile, which he called my Shemitah, my sabbatical year Cadillac. and he didn't waste no time telling his fellow farmers, you're riding for an entire year. Look how Hashem rewards those who keep Shemitah. You know, fascinating stories. And I'll tell you one more, unfortunately relevant. The people, rabbis, needed to get wheat before the sabbatical year so that they would have wheat to be able to grind it and make flour to be able to make matzah for Pesach. But they wanted to buy it before the Shemitah year. That means before Rosh Hashanah, before the new year. So they found a farmer that had a large amount of wheat, and they asked him, "Can we buy it from you?" And he said, and they said, "We'll buy your entire stock, everything you have in the field." And they checked it out, and they said, "Okay." And they negotiated with him. They said, "We're buying entire stock. You don't have to look for anybody to purchase it." And they did it a little early, but they managed to get it was ripe enough that they could cut it. They cut it, and the fields were empty. This huge field was near Gaza. And what had happened was, in those days, the terrorists built tunnels into Israel from Gaza. And what happened was, they were expecting to find a full field with wheat in it that they could hide in. When they popped up, there was no wheat in the field because it had been cut because of the sabbatical year. And the Israelis have these balloons and the cameras, and they were able to see the terrorists right away, and they were able to send a strike and get rid of them. So again, Shemitah is something that is an exceptionally challenging thing to keep, but these people do keep it. And it's a huge job, and it takes tremendous faith, and it's a reminder for all of us. And this, by the way, has very practical ramifications for us when it comes to work. A lot of people say, "I'd love to do this and that, but I can't because of my job." But if you understand that Hashem is the provider, God is the provider, then that's a different story. How many people do you know that are out of work? They had a good job and they lost their job. So we have to balance, which is a longer discussion, but balance our effort with faith in God. You can't stay at home and wait for the check to come in the mail. You actually have to go do the work, but at the same time, not overdo it. And at the same time, have faith that the Almighty, I'll make my effort, and the rest is up to the Almighty. And how many people, you have a salesman, he wined and dined one company for weeks on end. And in the end, they said, "No, we're going with your competitor." And then the next day you get a phone call. Someone calls up and says, "Oh, I hear you have this and that, and that. I want to buy it from you." You didn't do the effort, and it just came your way. So it's again, like I said, a balance of doing our effort and at the same time relying on Hashem as well. So after 7 Shemitah years, you count 7 times 7, you have 49 years. Then the 50th year, is called Yovel, known as the Jubilee year. Jewish slaves were freed, land in Israel was returned to original owners, and again, no work in the field as well. Now, there's a powerful line that I want to read to you on page 698, 700. So if you look, I'll read in English in 699, verse 18. You shall No, excuse me, top of 700. The land will give its fruit, and you will eat your fill, and you will dwell securely in it. If you will say, what shall we eat in the 7th year? Behold, we will not sow, we will not gather in our crops. I will ordain my blessing for you in the 6th year, and will eat a crop sufficient for the 3-year period. You will sow in the 8th year, but you will eat from the old crops until the 9th year, till the arrival of crops you shall eat. So this is God's guarantee that it's going to be taken care of. By the way, who can make that kind of guarantee? Only God. And it's interesting, it's important to realize that the sabbatical year is not just everyone on their own schedule. The sabbatical year was the same year for all of the country. So therefore, if it's not God doing it, then after the first time, guess what? Everyone's going to die, God forbid, right? So miraculously, somehow or another, a little less, a little more, but everyone managed to survive. And that's why, because only God can make that guarantee. So again, this is a very important idea that even though the one who has the field in America doesn't have to keep the sabbatical year. That's only for the fields in Israel. But the concept of faith and the concept of doing the right thing, even though logically, how am I going to manage? The Almighty provides, and we have to do ours and realize that He's the one. He's really the boss. So if you go back to page 699. On verse 14, it says, when you make a sale to your fellow, did anyone have any questions about the Shemitah, or is everything okay? Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry? Yeah.
It only refers to lands in Israel, right?
Yes, but it's relevant to us also because sometimes fruits are imported to America, and we went, oh, I buy Israel fruit, but if they don't keep Shemitah, then you can't use it. It may say it, or don't buy Israeli products, as it doesn't say, because you don't want to, only during the Shemitah year. The rest of the time, it's fine. Oh, if you hang out in the community enough, you'll find out. I'll let you know. Yeah.
So you said that so when someone buys property in Israel, like say now, and say it has to be 7 years, how do they calculate when that is for that person that is buying?
I don't understand what your question is.
In other words, if it's 7 years and you say it doesn't depend on when you buy it.
Right.
It depends on, it all started at the same time.
Right.
So how do one calculate that the Shemitah, say you find it in Israel, how do they calculate?
You talk about a field?
Yeah.
So you find out when is Shemitah. So Shemitah is in 5 years. Okay. So I have the use of the land for 5 years. Total use. And then otherwise, then I have to work out with how I get my produce from, what they do with it. Any question?
I heard with the Israeli wine, you have to be careful because it's used in years to come. So you have to keep track.
Well, that could be the rabbinical supervision. If you have reliable rabbinical supervision, then it's going to be fine. So let's go back to here, verse 14 and 699. When you make a sale to your fellow, you make purchase for the hand of your fellow. Do not aggrieve one another. Then it says in verse 17, each of you shall not aggrieve his fellow, and you shall fear God, for I am Hashem your God. So it talks about not aggrieving 2 times. Why does it talk about not aggrieving somebody? Aggrieving means causing pain to somebody else. You're not supposed to cause pain to somebody else. So why does it repeat the words? In the Torah, there's no superfluous words. And the answer is the first one is referring to financial aggrieving, overcharging somebody deliberately. Now, there's certain circumstances when you can. If you have a water stand in the Mojave Desert, you can charge extra because water there is worth a lot. But assuming you're in the city, you can't overcharge for things. And you can't underpay either if you know the value of something. So another example would be selling old items as new. That's you're financially aggrieving them. So verse 17 is referring to causing pain to somebody else with words. This is very, very important. For example, reminding somebody of their past negative behaviors. Here's an interesting one: going into a store and when you have no interest in buying and making the salesman or woman crazy with, let me try this, let me try that, and in the end not buying anything. Now you can window shop, that's allowed, and you can tell the person, I'm not sure I'm going to buy, I'm just looking around, but I would like to see, this shoe in my size and try it out. That's fine. But if you're coming in and you're just playing around and you have no intention of buying and you don't say anything to the owner, then you're causing him pain because he's hoping to be a sale, right? Saying hurtful things, no insulting nicknames. There was a man who, sometimes some nicknames stick, like we talked about the people calling this guy Mr. Celery, or this guy, oh, he's fat, say his fatso's coming. So a great rabbi once heard one of his followers say a derogatory term to somebody. And the rabbi said, hey, you can't do that. And you can't talk like that to somebody. And the man said to the rabbi, everybody calls him that. And the rabbi said, hell has plenty of room. There'll be plenty of room in hell for all of them. You still can't do it, So and why does it say you shall refrain, not agree with your fellow, and you shall fear God, your God, for I am Hashem, your God? What does that have to do with it? Because sometimes a person said, I was just kidding. Well, first of all, God knows for sure your full intent, and just kidding, and also having God's name in the verse tells us that it shows the gravity of the issue. Now, interesting, what's worse? Aggrieving somebody financially or aggrieving somebody with words? Why? Easy to fix if you can, pay back money. But it also lasts longer, the pain of that. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel had a very worthy, a very special servant called Tevi. And he asked him, I'd like you to go to the market and buy a good food. And he went to the market and he bought tongue. Tongue is the type of meat. I know some of you don't like it. My brother, blessed memory, said the reason why some people don't like tongue because they don't want someone tasting them while they're tasting it. But be that as it may, he bought tongue. Some people like it a lot. So the next day he said, Tari, that was a good choice. Now I want you to go to the market and buy me food that's bad. And he came back with tongue. And he said, I don't understand. I asked you for good food, you bought tongue. I asked for bad food, you bought tongue. Why? He says the tongue can be very, very good depending how you use it. And the tongue, meaning a human tongue, can be very, very bad depending on how you use it. So he liked his lesson. Now, part of this causing someone pain is people insulting another person. How do you respond to an insult? So there is some opinions that say in the heat of the moment you can respond back with an insult, though it's not recommended. And it's very meritorious not to respond with an insult. And this is a very important idea because there's a special blessing that comes along with with not answering back. Someone insults you and you don't answer back, that's, very, very special. You hold yourself back, refrain from answering back. It's difficult and not easy to do. And again, not always do a person have to, according to some opinions. But if you do, it's and I'll tell you a fascinating story. There was a couple that came to a rabbi for a blessing to have a child. And the rabbi said something to them and said, look, I know you prayed and I prayed for you. I don't see it happening. Pretty strong words. However, and they were very crestfallen, but the however picked theirs up. If someone is embarrassed in public, and in the merit of that they don't answer, they give you a blessing, that's worth a lot. That could tip the scales in your favor. Okay? So what ended up happening was different story. There was a couple that was looking to buy an apartment in Israel, and they came to look at the apartment. When they came out of it, a neighbor came to them and said, "Don't buy this apartment." And why not? Because they built some of it on my property. Oh boy. But they really liked the apartment. Then they did a little research, and the research showed that that lady was not correct. The apartment was built on not on this other person's property, and they could buy it. They went to ask a rabbi. Rabbi said, "Go for it. You like the apartment? It's a good deal. Buy it." So they went to buy it, and they had some celebration in the shul, and the crazy neighbor came in and started embarrassing the woman and saying, "You stole my property. You're on my property. You shouldn't have bought the apartment. What you buy it for?" And she was like so taken aback, so embarrassed. And someone sitting next to her pulled on her and said, "Please don't answer back. Please don't answer back." But she's embarrassing me in front of everybody. I'll tell you why in a minute. Okay. She didn't answer back. She refrained herself. And then the woman said to her, "I've been waiting for over a year to find somebody who's being embarrassed in public. And I ask you to give me a blessing that I should have a child in the merit of you not answering her back." And, they both hugged, and the lady gave her a beautiful blessing. And sure enough, the lady had a baby. So the power of not answering back is really amazing. Just going back to the financial thing, the Chavetz Chaim, the great sage Rabbi Meir Cohen Kagan, had a store in Radin that his wife was running. It was a small grocery store, and people loved buying from him because he was honest. His weights were very honest, and the service, everything was great. And the Chavetz Chaim was concerned that he was taking away business from the other people, so he closed the store in the afternoon so that the people would be forced to go to the others. You don't have to do that by Jewish law, but that's what he did, because he wanted to not cause any damage to somebody else. The mitzvah of helping the poor. Page 703. Verse 35, if your brother becomes impoverished and his means falter in your proximity, you shall strengthen him. A resident or a convert, so that he can live with you. Do not take from him interest and increase. You shall fear your God. Let your brother live with you. Do not give him your money for interest, and do not give you food for interest. So this is the law about the importance of giving charity. And what's interesting about it is the Rambam, Maimonides, has 8 levels of giving charity. The highest form is making a partnership with him, or giving the person a job. or a substantial gift or loan so that the person can do what they can. Why is that the highest form?
Because
I'm sorry?
it's
It's better to teach the person how to fish instead of giving him fish. So the person can become self-sufficient. Clear? Is this good? Number 2, where you're giving charity and you don't know who it's going to, and the person doesn't know who gave it, meaning you have to have a reliable intermediary that is using the money honestly and giving it to the right person. What's the advantage of that? Of not the person not knowing who it goes to and that person not knowing who gave it? Yeah?
So it doesn't show embarrassment to the person that's receiving, and it doesn't then also owe them, feeling that they owe them.
Right. Nobody knows who's who, so the money is being given discreetly and level 3, the giver knows, but the receiver does not know. So that's better because at least the receiver won't be embarrassed. Level 4, the receiver knows, but the giver doesn't know. So he won't be embarrassed from that particular person. Number 5, giving without being asked. The person knows who it is, and the receiver knows who it is. Level 6, giving after being asked. Okay. Number 7, gives an inadequate inadequate amount with a smile. Or the 8th one is gives an adequate amount, but unwillingly, but without a smile. So these are I'll go through them quickly again. The 8 levels. The highest is a partnership, job, or substantial gift alone. 2 is neither of them knowing, the giver or the receiver. 3 is the giver knows, the recipient doesn't. 4, the recipient knows, but the giver doesn't. 5 is giving without being asked. 7, giving after being asked. 7 is giving an inadequate amount, but with a smile. And 8 is giving unwillingly without a smile. So these are the different levels of charity, which is a very important idea about how to do it. A poor widow came to Reb Chaim Halberstam of Sanz, the Tzanzer Rebbe, great Hasidic master, and asked him for charity. She told him she was used up a little money she had to purchase apples to be sold at the market, but no one wanted to buy them. Reb Chaim told her, bring the apples to the market, and he himself went there to sell them. When people saw the great rabbi selling apples, everyone wanted to buy his apples. And he gave her all the money. There's an interesting Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had a dream the night of Rosh Hashanah that his 2 nephews would lose a sum of 700 dinars in the course of the coming year. After Yom Tov, he visited his nephews and ordered them to take charge of supporting the poor. Where should we get the funds from? I want you to start with your money and mark down the amounts that you're giving. And by the end of the year, I'll pay you. If you lose on the deal, I'll pay you. And they started giving out charity. To the close of the year, a government official came to them, demanded that they pay the government 700 dinars, the same amount that he had dreamt about. Rabbi Yochanan heard the news and went to see his neighbors in prison. How much money did you give out for tzedakah? He said, for charity, we calculated it 683 dinars. He says, okay, give me another 17 dinars and I guarantee you'll leave prison. That's a weird idea. They want us to pay 700 and with 17, you're going to get us out? Just give me 17, don't worry. They gave it to him and he went to see the emissary of the government. He slipped the coins to his hand and he asked them to let the nephews escape, and that's what they did. The nephews came and said, I don't get it. How could 17 dinars ensure our escape? He says, because I had a dream Rosh Hashanah night that you would lose 700 dinars this year. Since you were destined to have this expense, I advise you to become supporters of the poor. Better to spend the money on tzedakah. Why didn't you tell us about the dream? Because I wanted you to give it just I kept a secret from you that you should give out for the sake of heaven and for the sake of the mitzvah, and it was for your benefit. And that's why you needed just 17 more dinners to get it out, because that's what you were destined to lose. All right. Going back to not charging the person with interest, a man needed money for a business venture, and he invested it, and he went to the Chassam Sofer, and the Chassam Sofer lent him the money, and the man was able to repay the loan, and he did very well, and to show his gratitude, he gave the Chassam Sofer a beautiful sparkling diamond. The Chassam Sofer held the diamond in his hand and expressed amazement of the stone's brilliance, and he gave it back to him. It says, "What's wrong? Does the diamond have a flaw?" No, not at all. It's perfect. But if I would keep it, I would be flawed. I would be flawed, because then I would be taking interest from you. I gave you the money, and now you're giving me a diamond, and you paid me back the money, and now I'm taking a diamond. So I'm sorry, I don't understand. If you intended to return the diamond, why did you examine it so carefully? I looked at the diamond to admire its beauty and greatness, but how much greater is the mitzvah of not charging interest. Very beautiful, very beautiful. Let's conclude with something the oral Torah teaches us. In the Gemara, the Talmud says 10 matters were created, each stronger than the next. Rock is strong, but iron breaks it. Iron is strong, but fire melts it. Fire is strong, but water extinguishes it. Water is strong, but then clouds carry it. Clouds are strong, but the wind disperses them. Wind is strong, but the body holds it. The body is strong, but fear breaks it. Death, however, is mightier than all the aforementioned. And what's even more powerful than that? Tzedakah, charity, because it rescues from death. So that's it. This is in a nutshell. Thank you. Questions, comments, thoughts? Anybody on Zoom? Alive?
I would like to make a comment.
Yes, Malcolm.
You said it's better to give somebody to teach somebody how to fish rather than give him a fish.
Right.
And then you said because that would make him efficient. So you'll have to forgive me for that, but I just had to.
Malcolm, I hope you feel better now. Very good. So, but that's obviously, sometimes when a person's starving, you can't, let me teach you how to fish. That's you do when he's not hungry. First feed him, but very
Correct.
good. Any other thoughts, comments, any other puns? Yeah, go ahead.
The most tzedakah you went over, does that be outside of your family, or does it also?
When you say family, what do you mean? If you give dessert to your husband, that's not tzedakah. Okay, it depends. Are they in need? Are they not in need? But yes, you can give charity to family members. But again, it has to be. Do they have a financial need or not? And whether or not it can be counted toward your charity account is a good question. That depends much more on the details of how are they doing. But normally we give a minimum of 10%, and in most cases a maximum of 20% of what we earn to worthy Jewish causes, and that's tzedakah, that's charity. Family members depends on how dire the situation is.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions, thoughts, comments? Again, we have a class on 7 o'clock on June 2nd on the laws and customs of Shavuos. Everyone is invited to attend. All right. Have a great week, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care. Take care, Ruth.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Czapnik.
Brock,
Thank you. Thank you.
you're welcome. Take care.
Thank-
Zoom participants, Elisheva, Chani, Bracha, Malka, take care.
Thank
Take care, Rabbi. Bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.